Hey folks, welcome back. In this video, we will be talking about Python exceptions. So let's define what is an exception. So exception is nothing but an error that occurred during the execution of a program. So when exception happens, the program just halts. It don't execute further. So that's why we have to handle those exceptions. So let's look at the built-in exceptions in Python. So here we can see that I just listed only 15 of them, but we have more. So syntax error. So this exception happens when a syntax is incorrect, and then indentation error. So if we didn't follow the correct indentation, and then we can see the indentation error. Name error. So when the variable name is not defined, and then the name error will be thrown. And type error. So if the value is provided, but it is not the correct type. Let's say we are trying to concatenate integer and string, then we get type error because the type doesn't support. And then we have a value error. So if the value, when we are trying to convert any integer to any string to integer, that is not possible, like abc to int, and then we get the value error because the value cannot be converted. So file not found error. So when we try to read a file from the file system and that doesn't exist, and then we get this error. IO error. So when we do input output operations, then it will raise the IO error. And index error. So let's say we define a list and we try to access an object of from a list, but the list is out of index. Let's say we have only three elements, and when we try to access a fifth element of the list, and then we get index error. So key error. So when we use the dictionary and we try to access the key that doesn't exist in the dictionary, and then we get the key error. So zero division error. So when we try to divide any number with zero, then we get this zero division error exception. And attribute error. So when we define any object and then we try to access an attribute that does not available on that object, and then we get attribute error. So import error. So when we try to import any module that doesn't exist, and then we get import error. So runtime error. So when an error detected that doesn't fall into any other categories, then we get the runtime error. Memory error. It is raised when an operation runs out of memory, and then we get the memory error. Overflow error is raised when the result of an arithmetic operation is too large to be represented, and then we get overflow error. So all these exceptions are child classes of exception class. So exception is the base class for all the listed exceptions. And let's say if we have any custom exception also, then we need to inherit this exception class. So let's look at the simple example for syntax error and zero division error. So let me go here and open playground, and let me copy this code and paste it here, or let me copy all of it. So just copy it, comment out this code, the zero division error. So, or just let me remove it. Let's run it, python playground.py. So here we can see that we got syntax error. So let me undo this and remove this. So now what we are doing, so we are just dividing the number 10 with number 0. So let's clear this out and run python playground. So now we can see that we got a zero division error, division by 0. So that's how Python throws the exceptions. So far we have seen how an exception occurs. Let's look at how we can handle these exceptions. So this is the block, try except else finally. So we use this syntax to handle these exceptions. So let's look at the basic try except block. So this is the syntax for that. Let me copy this to playground and just remove this and replace it. So yeah, so here we have this try keyword. After that we need to have a colon, and inside that try block we need to have the indentation space for any statements that we use. So here we have this statement that is result equals to 10 divided by 0, and after that we are using this keyword that is except, and then space. After that we are giving the exception name, so that is zero division error. And so once this exception happens, this except blocks gets executed, and then what are the statements inside this except block. So here we also need to have the indentation here. There is this. So once we have that, we can have the exception. So once we handle this exception, so whatever the code that we want to execute, so we can add all those statements here. So let's run it. Let me open terminal and run Python playground. So here we can see that can't divide number by 0. So let's say here we have number 2, and then if we run it, so we didn't get this print statement. That's because this code didn't, whatever the code that inside try block, that didn't throw any error. So that's the reason we didn't see this print statement executed. So this is how we use try except, basic try except block to handle the exception. Okay, let's go and see how we can handle multiple exceptions. So in order to handle multiple exceptions, we can use the syntax something like this. So let me copy this code to playground. Okay, so let's look at this code. So here what we are doing, so we are just taking the input from the user, and then inside try block we have two statements. That is, we are just converting that whatever the user given input into integer. So once we convert that input into integer, and then we are dividing 100 with the whatever the value that a user gave. So when any exception happens here, so we are only catching value error and zero division error. So if any value error value error exception occurs, and then it will be handled inside this exception block. So let's go to playground, clear this out and run it again. Let's give 10. So nothing happens because we have an integer. So when we convert string 10 to integer, so it didn't throw any error. And after that, when we divide the 100 divided by whatever the value, the value that we received is 10, and then it executed without throwing any error. So that's why we didn't see this print statement or except block executed. So now let's run it again, and this time just give 0 as input. So now we can see that this is an invalid value. That's because when we divide the number with 0, so this 0 division error exception occurs. So that's why this except block executed, and inside that we have this print statement, and it did print the error invalid value. So let's look at one more input. This time I'm just giving ABCD. So this time also this except block executed, and it did print error invalid value. That's because this time when we convert the ABCD to integer, so it throws value error. That's because we cannot convert ABCD, that is string, into integer. So this way we can handle multiple exceptions inside only one except statement, or we can also use two except statements to handle these two exceptions separately. So let me modify this code a bit. Except, and then let's have one more print statement here, and this time error input, or let's use string format here, number is not a number, and can't divide with 0. Okay, let's run it. Python playground.py. So once we run it, so let's say if I give ABCD, so that should throw this value error. So once this exception occurs, we need to that needs to be handled by this block, and then we need to get this error. So let's run it. So here we can see that error ABCD is not a number. So let's run it again, and this time give 0. So can't divide with 0. So let's execute one more time and give correct number, a valid number. So it did nothing. That's because it did store the variable, I mean the value in the result, and then we are not printing anything. So that's why we get that. So let's add a print statement here to the result value. Let me copy this and use print statement output. Let's run it again. So let me give 5 this time. So here we can see that the output is 20. So this is how we handle multiple exceptions using multiple except blocks or one except block with multiple exceptions. So that is third, handling multiple exceptions. And we can use else class with try except block. So this is the example for that. Let me copy this from here to here and replace that. Let me open the terminal and clear this out. Okay, so let's look at this code. So in the first statement, I mean in the first line, we are receiving number from the user as number 1, and in the second statement, we are using number 2 and receiving the value from the user. So inside try block, we are just using result equals to float. We are just converting the number 1 to float and then number 2 to float. And so once that is done, we have except statement that handles both value error and zero division error. And we also have else block. So once we what we are doing, we are trying to execute this block of code. So once this block of code executed properly, then only this else clause or the else block gets executed. Um, Otherwise, if this block of code, I mean the try block throws any error, and then except will catch these exceptions, and then it executes this statement. So let's look at that. Python playground.py. So let's give number 1 as 10. Okay, this should also be number 2. Okay, let me stop this execution and run python playground.py again. So let's give 10 and number 2 as 5. So this else block executed and we got the result as 2. So let's give 10 and ABCD. So now we got error, invalid error. That's because we are handling that exception in this except block. So that's how we use else statement with try except. Let's go back to readme and let's look at how we can use finally keyword with the try except. So let's copy this code to playground and let's replace that. So let's look at this code. So here we have this try block. After that we have this except block, and we also have finally block. So find whatever the code that we have inside this finally block. So that's get executed irrespective of this except and the try. So if this try block runs properly without any exception, then also this finally block code executed will gets executed. And then let's say if it this try block throws any error, and that will be handled in this exception. In that case also, whatever the code that we have that gets executed. So in this case, what we are doing. So let me explain it. So we imported the SQL statement here. I mean this SQLite 3, that is the database, Python database, and we are reading the data from this file, that is database.db, and we are trying to connect to the database here in the line number 6, and then we are fetching the cursor, and after that we are executing the SQL statement, that is select 1 plus 1, and after that we are fetching this result. And if any exception happens, like the database error, and then we are printing the statement inside the except block. So irrespective of this block of code, and we are using this finally to close this connection. So let's say this till this part it did executed properly, and after that it did throw this error, and then we just need to close that connection. So that's why we have this finally block. So let's run it. Let me clear this out, run it. Python playground.py. So once we run this, so we got this 2, that is result, and then we can see that database connection closed. So here we connected to the database, and then here we are closing this connection. So that's how we use try except finally to handle the database connections, and in other use cases also we can do this. But this is a simple use case that explains where we use this try except and finally class. That's how we handle the exceptions, that built-in exceptions. So let's look at how we can create our own custom exceptions and raise these exceptions inside our code. So this is the simple example for that. Let me copy this code to playground and remove all this code and paste it and save it. So yeah, here we need to have 2 lines. That's why it did show that error. So that's fine. So here what we are doing, so we created our custom exception, that is grade error. So we inherited the exception class. So this is the base class for all exceptions that we define in Python. So here we have this function that is validate grade. So here what it is doing, so if the grade value is between 0 to 100, and then that is correct, otherwise it will throw the error. Looks like the uh, logic is incorrect here. Oh yeah, the logic is correct. So if it is not between the 0 and 100, and then we get the grade error, that is grade value should be between 0 and 100. So let me call this grade print. Oh, okay. Let me make it simple. Result equals to validate grade of, let me give 10, and print result. Let's go here, clear this out, and run python playground.py. So here we can see that we got 10. That's because 10 is a valid value. That's between 0 and 100. So let's say if the value is incorrect, and then we get this grade error. So let's try to do that. Let's give value as -10 and run python playground.py. So here we can see that we got this grade error exception. So where it happened, it did throw at line number 7. So here we are throwing that exception. So that's because we gave the value as -10, and that is invalid value, and that's why we got this grade error. So let's give one more input, that is 200, and let's run it. So this time also we got the error. That's because we are validating that, and whatever the thing that we have here, that is 0 to the value should be between 0 to 100. If it's not, then we are throwing this grade error. So that's why it did throw the grade error. So this is how we define our custom exceptions, and we use the raise keyword, that is this one, raise keyword, and we uh, throw the error something like this. So we just have to initialize the uh, exception class object that throws this error. So this is how we define our own custom exceptions and use it. Yeah, so that's all about exception handling in Python. So if you find this video is useful, then like the video and share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.